want to get into the computer business. A word that you own in the mind. You ever consider the possibility that just, mental weakens you. Use toy business in America. In the industrial field, one of your problems with a second brand or a third brand is, in some cases, as you just said, all the personal computer manufacturers. You think this was successful? The purpose of the meeting was to discuss how to market a word that you own in the mind. I'm Al Reis, and I'm a marketing consultant from New York. I'm here to talk about marketing. What is marketing? Fundamentally, marketing is building a brand inside the mind of the customer or prospect. How do you build a brand? Well, you do it with advertising and communications. But there's a big change taking place in how you advertise and communicate. You see, it used to be that you looked at your product or service, you looked for features, benefits, and then you advertise those features or benefits. But the problem is, there's just too much advertising out there. And people would ignore what your message is. What is positioning? Positioning is a new way to look at the function of advertising. 24 years ago, Jack Trout and I wrote an article for Advertising Age magazine called "The Positioning Era Cometh." Since then, positioning has become a buzzword in advertising and marketing circles around the world. What is positioning? Actually, it's a very simple idea. It's based on this principle, that most advertising is conceived to be communications. People look at themselves, they look at their products, they figure out what they want to say, and then they communicate those ideas with customers or prospects. That's the communication formula that used to be used by most advertisers. We said, look, the problem with that formula is that we live in an over-communicated society. There are just too many messages out there. If you don't tune your message to the mind of the customer or prospect, you're not going to get into the mind. See, positioning as a concept starts with the mind of the customer or prospect. You look for holes in that mind, and then you run advertising and marketing programs designed to fill a hole in the mind. That is the fundamental concept of positioning, and we think that it can be a very powerful tool to help you make more effective advertising and marketing programs. The concept of positioning is 24 years old. In those years, we've developed our ideas into some basic laws of marketing. So I thought you might be interested in what the laws of marketing are. It's better to be first than it is to be better. Now that might sound strange, but let me demonstrate the power of being first. Let me ask you a question. What's the name of the first person to fly solo across the North Atlantic? Not a trick question. You all know that's Charles Lindbergh, right? Charles Lindbergh. Now, what's the name of the second person to fly solo across the North Atlantic? Not too easy to answer, is it? Happens to be a man named Bert Hinkler. Bert was a better pilot, he flew faster, he consumed less fuel. But who's ever heard of Bert Hinkler? He left home, and his mother hasn't heard from him since. Come on, Bert, call home. Your mother's getting worried. How about this? What's the name of the first sea captain to make a voyage to America? Of course, that's Christopher Columbus. Everybody knows that. What's the name of the second? Who knows? Lost in history. The same thing is true of products. What's the largest cola? Coca-Cola. What's the first rent-a-car service? Hertz. What's the largest rent-a-car service? Hertz. What's the first tissue? Kleenex. What's the largest tissue? Kleenex. You see, the leader, the largest selling brand in virtually every category is Charles Lindbergh, the first. It's better to be first than it is to be better. What's the name of the first college founded in America? You're probably thinking there are 2,500 colleges and universities in America. How would I know who's first? But you do. You see, all you have to do is ask yourself, who's the most famous? And of course, you have to admit, it's Harvard. Harvard was the first college founded in America. What's the name of the second? It's not Bert Hinkler University, no. It's William and Mary. Nice place, but not exactly in the same category as Harvard. What's the name of the first champagne? Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon is the Harvard of champagne. If you want to be a leader, if you want to be rich and famous and successful, it's better to be first than it is to be better. That's the law of leadership. Let's ask another question. What's the name of the third person to fly the Atlantic Ocean solo? You're probably thinking, if I didn't know the name of the second, how am I going to know the name of the third? But of course you do, because the third person was Amelia Earhart. Oh, now, is Amelia known as the third person to fly the Atlantic Ocean solo? No. She's known as the first woman to do it. Now you know one of the most important laws of marketing. If you can't be first, then you set up a new category you can be first in. Let's talk about a few examples of how you set up a new category. Take beer, for example. Heineken's was the first high-priced imported beer. They were first in the category. So what did the people at Anheuser-Busch do? They set up the first high-priced domestic beer, a brand called Michelob. And today Michelob outsells Heineken's 2-to-1 in the United States. The first light beer in America was Miller Lite. And so what is the leading light beer? It's Miller Lite. Now, it took an importer 5 years to say, hey, if there's a market for a domestic light beer, maybe there's a market for an imported light beer. And they introduced Amstel Light, the first imported light beer. And of course, it's the #1 brand of imported light beer. Now, not just beer and cola, but think about computers. The first computer was IBM. And 7 major American companies went head-to-head with IBM trying to make a better computer. Most of them lost hundreds of millions of dollars. One company, the Digital Equipment Corporation, thought like Amelia Earhart. They introduced the first mini computer. And Digital became a $14 billion company, the second largest computer company in the world. And then a company called Tandem invented the fault-tolerant computer. And Tandem became a $2 billion company. And then a company called Stratus invented the fault-tolerant mini computer. And Stratus became a $500 million company. And then, of course, there's Cray. Cray introduced the first supercomputer. And Cray became a $1 billion company. Now, think about this. Cray could have said, we have a more powerful mainframe. But if they did that, people would have thought, well, IBM makes mainframes. They're going to make a more powerful mainframe any day now. I'll wait for IBM. It's very important to set up the category supercomputer. And then a company called Convex introduced the mini supercomputer. Hey, this is a company that was bought last year by Hewlett-Packard for $150 million. The principles or laws of marketing are very, very simple. Not always easy to execute in practice, but they're very simple. Now, when you set up a category, it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, take Budget. Budget was the first low-cost car rental company, and Budget became the 4th largest car rental company. And hey, there's opportunities at high-end, high-priced products. For example, Haagen-Dazs was the first premium or gourmet ice cream. Became a very powerful, successful brand. And then there's Orville Redenbacher, the first gourmet popcorn. Became the leading brand. And of course, Grey Poupon, the first gourmet mustard, has 50% of the Dijon mustard business. And then there's Mentadent. The first baking soda peroxide toothpaste became the 3rd largest selling brand. And a product called soft soap, which was the first liquid hand soap, became the leading brand in the category. And then there was a soft drink called Snapple. Snapple was the first natural beverage. What's a natural beverage? I don't know. But this is a company that was bought by Quaker Oats for $1.7 billion. There are enormous opportunities in marketing today, but not by being better. You have to look for ways to set up a new category you can be first in. And the categories are only limited by your imagination. It could be price, it could be size, it could be almost anything. But it's far more important to set up a new category than to try to convince the public you have a better product than the leading brand. That's almost impossible. It's very easy today to set up a new category, but you know what? Most companies don't want to do that. They're looking for ways to introduce better products. The key question to ask yourself when you have a new product is, first what? Try to invent a category. Marketing today is more a battle of category than it is a battle of brands. That's the law of the category. The next law is the law of the mind. It's better to be first in the mind than it is to be first in the marketplace. See, now it gets a little more difficult. It's not enough just to introduce the first product in a category. It's not enough to set up a new category you can be first in. You got to use this in order to get in the mind first. For example, the first commercial computer was not IBM. It was Sperry Rand's Univac. But you see, they didn't mount a massive marketing program like IBM did. IBM put all their resources into the commercial computer, and they won the battle for the mind. They got in the mind first. The same thing is true of personal computers. The first personal computer was the MITS Altair 8800. Who's ever heard of MITS Altair 8800? I mean, that product is just as famous as Bert Hinkler. Nowhere. Who got in the mind first? Apple. Apple got in the mind first, and people think that Apple was the first personal computer. Not true. Now think about the word Apple as opposed to the name MITS Altair 8800. Apple is a nice, simple, easy name to remember. If you want to get in the mind first, you have to do the same thing. You have to have a nice, simple, easy name to remember. That's the law of the mind. Now, there's a lesson here. It's not necessary to invent everything. However, if you have the resources, you move rapidly enough, you can dominate a market by getting into the mind first. It is very, very important to your success to be first in the mind of the customer or prospect. That's one of the key essences of success in business today. The next law is related to the law of the mind. It's the law of perception. Marketing is not a battle of products. It's a battle of perceptions inside the mind of the customer or prospect. Let me give you an example. Take automobiles. Most people think when you sell an automobile, it's horsepower, styling, and whatever. Not necessarily true. You have to think about the perceptions of the car inside the mind. Take an example, the Japanese imported cars in America. Now, in the United States, the largest selling Japanese imported car is Honda. Number 2 is Toyota. Number 3 is Nissan. Now, in Japan, they sell exactly the same cars. You would think, would you not, if marketing were a battle of products, that the sales order in Japan would be at least similar to the sales order in the United States, but it's not. In Japan, Toyota is number 1, and Honda is number 3. In Japan, Toyota outsells Honda more than 4-1. The cars are the same, but the minds are different. If I walked into my office in New York and told my daughter I bought a Honda, she'd say, "Dad, what kind of a Honda did you get? Did you get the 2-door, the 4-door? Did you get the hatchback?" If I lived in Tokyo and walked into the office and told my associates, I bought a Honda, they would say to me, Al, what kind of a motorcycle did you buy? Because you see, in Japan, when you say Honda, you think motorcycle. So why would you buy an automobile from a motorcycle company? That doesn't fit the perception of Honda in the mind. Take another example, Coca-Cola. As you may know, a number of years ago, Coke introduced a better tasting product called New Coke. How do we know it was better tasting? Because the Coca-Cola company did 200,000 taste tests, and they proved that New Coke tastes better than Pepsi, and Pepsi tastes better than the original formula, now called Coca-Cola Classic. So what is winning the battle? Is it the best tasting cola? No. New Coke, the best tasting cola, is number 3 in sales. And the regular Coca-Cola, the old formula, now called Coca-Cola Classic, is number 1 in sales. Why is that? Well, think about it. The can says New Coke. People look at that and say, they changed the formula. I'm not going to like the taste of that. So you taste it and say, I don't like the taste. The mind tells the mouth what something ought to taste like. Perception is critical in marketing. It's perception. You have to match what's in the mind if you want to be successful. Take another example. Volkswagen. Volkswagen came into the U.S. market with a small, ugly, but reliable car called the Volkswagen Beetle. It quickly became the best-selling imported car in America. 1 year, it had 67% of the imported car market. So what did Volkswagen do? They came out with a full line of good-looking cars. People looked at those cars and said, they're not Volkswagens. So today, Volkswagen's share of the imported car market is just 4%, in spite of the fact they have a full line of 8 good-looking cars. Now, Volkswagen, as you may know, has been showing a new car called Concept 1 in automobile shows around the world. People look at that car, small, ugly, reliable, and say, that's a Volkswagen. I think that car is going to be a big seller. It matches what's in the mind of the customer. That's the law of perception. The next law is the law of focus. The most powerful concept in marketing is owning a word, just a simple word, in the prospect's mind. Take an example. Emery Air Freight was the first and largest air cargo carrier in America. What did Emery Air Freight offer? Everything. Anything you wanted to ship. Small packages, large packages, overnight service, 2 or 3 day delayed service. Anything you wanted to ship, you could ship via Emery Air Freight. What did Federal Express do? Federal Express narrowed the focus to one service, small packages overnight. And today, Federal Express is a much bigger company than Emery. As a matter of fact, Mr. Emery got fired. Now, what is the advantage of narrowing the focus to overnight service only? It's because Federal Express owns the word overnight in the mind of the customer. When people want to ship a package overnight, they say, let's FedEx it. That means overnight service. Take another example, pizza. See, the pizza market isn't one market. It's at least 3 markets. It's the eat-in market, the restaurant tables and waitresses. It's the take-out market, you take the pizza home. And it's the home delivery market. Now, Pizza Hut is the leader. They have the advantage of being first. But the number 2 and 3 brands are the ones that just sell a slice of the market. For example, Domino's Pizza is the number 2 brand. They focused on home delivery. By focusing on home delivery only, they were able to put that concept in the mind. When you think home delivery, you think Domino's Pizza. Now, Little Caesars, on the other hand, focuses on the takeout pizza business. Now, takeout is the cheapest way to sell a pizza. You have no waiters or waitresses or tables. You have no delivery trucks. So their focus is 2 pizzas for the price of 1. Or as they say in their advertising, pizza, pizza. They spend $50 million saying, pizza, 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 pizza. Believe me, after 2 weeks or so, that idea is firmly embedded in the mind. If you want 2 pizzas for the price of 1, you got to go to Little Caesars. That same principle applies to whatever you sell. For example, BMW became the largest selling luxury German car, outsells Mercedes by focusing on one word, driving, the ultimate driving machine. And Volvo became the largest selling European imported car in the U.S. market by focusing on safety. Of course, it helps that a Volvo kind of looks like a tank. I mean, it looks safe. A Ferrari looks dangerous just parked at the curb. That's why Volvo can run an ad comparing themselves to a tank. The execution is different, but the concept is basically the same. And take spaghetti sauce. The leading brand of spaghetti sauce is Ragu. Ragu comes in 6 different varieties. Used to have 51% of the market, no more. Ragu's market share today is 37% of the market. Why? Because they were attacked by a spaghetti sauce called Prego with 1 variety, just 1. But you see, Prego says thick. We're thick. And Prego has 27% of the market with 1 variety. The most powerful concept in marketing today is owning a word in the mind. Federal Express owns overnight. Domino's owns home delivery. Little Caesars owns takeout. BMW owns driving. Volvo owns safety. Prego owns thick. Now, interestingly enough, if you find the right word, it can last forever. Crest got in the mind by being the first cavity-fighting toothpaste in 1956. Today, Crest is still the #1 brand of toothpaste and still is the cavity-fighting toothpaste. Owning a word in the mind is one of the most powerful ways to build a successful marketing program. That's the law of focus. The most powerful concept in marketing is owning a word in the mind. Interestingly enough, if you can own 1 word in the mind, the prospect will give you many others. Not everybody can be a leader, but there's good news. It's the law of duality. In the long run, every market becomes a 2-horse race. So there's an opportunity for 2 brands in every category. Take the cola field. Coke was first. Coke is powerful. But there was an opportunity for Pepsi-Cola to become the 2nd brand. However, if you're the 3rd brand, like Royal Crown Cola is, you're in for serious problems. Because really, there's only room for 2 brands in the mind. And actually, there's only room for 2 brands in the supermarket. Now, take another example, orange juice. A number of years ago, Procter & Gamble, really a powerful marketing organization, decided to introduce an orange juice called Citrus Hill. But Citrus Hill was #3 in a category. We had 2 big leaders. We had Minute Maid and we had Tropicana. There was no room for Citrus Hill. Procter & Gamble spent 10 years trying to get Citrus Hill into the supermarkets and into a successful brand. It never made it. It lost money 10 years in a row, and they finally killed the brand, and it cost them $200 million to shut it down. Wherever you look today, where the category is mature, you find 2 major brands. Athletic shoes, we got Nike and Reebok, and everybody else is very small. In airplanes, worldwide, we have 2 brands, Boeing and Airbus. And McDonnell Douglas, the 3rd largest maker of airplanes, is in trouble. Wherever you look today, you find the same phenomenon. 2 brands dominate the category. In batteries, it's Eveready and it's Duracell. In mouthwash, it's Scope and Listerine. In tires, it's Michelin and Goodyear. In toothpaste, it's Crest and it's Colgate. Every single category tends to have two brands. Take political parties. In the United States, we have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Two parties dominate the category. As a matter of fact, if you look around the world today, where you find two major political parties, you find political stability. It's only when you have one party that you find, incipient dictatorships, or if you have multiple parties, you have greater instability of government. In government, in brands, wherever you look, two brands will long-term dominate the category. That's the law of duality. Now that we know that there's always room for two brands in a market, the question is, how do you become a strong number two? Since we talked about the law of duality, you might be interested in how you get to be number two if you weren't the leader. Well, that is the law of the opposite. If you're shooting for second place, your strategy is determined by the leader. You have to do the opposite of what the leader does. There's a philosophy here. In strength, there is weakness. Take the dinosaur. The dinosaur is the most powerful animal that ever walked the earth. But what is the weakness if you happen to weigh 20 tons? You know what the weakness is? You have to eat 2 tons of cereal for breakfast just to maintain your weight. Now, some scientists think that when an asteroid hit the Yucatan and kind of blocked out the sun for a couple 100,000 years, these poor guys never got enough to eat and they died out. So there is always weakness inherent in strength. Take the big, powerful Kodosaurus. It's what I like to call Kodak. They have 85% of the amateur photographic film business in America. 85%. Now, we were asked to develop a program for 3M, which is the leading manufacturer of private label photographic film, but they wanted to launch a brand. So here's what we said. Look, where is Kodak strong? Everywhere. Anywhere you go in the world today, you can buy Kodak film. Now, what is the weakness inherent in that universal availability? Well, the weakness is that, they manufacture film like you make bananas, that you pick them green and they ripen on the shelf. That film ripens on the shelf. That's not the way they sell professional film. They sell professional film refrigerated, so it's ready to use. It's mature, ready to go. So we suggested to 3M that they launch a brand of amateur photographic film called True Color. It's the first refrigerated film. Now, you can't sell that everywhere. But we said, well, that's okay. Sell it in the supermarket in a 6-pack. And tell the customers to take the 6-pack home and put it in the refrigerator, and it's ready to go. That didn't fly at 3M, but I think that's still a very good idea for somebody who wants to be number two in the photographic film business. Take another example that did fly. We were working for a bank in the state of New Jersey called United Jersey. Now, United Jersey competes with the big banks. Banks like Citibank and Chase Manhattan Bank. Where's a big bank strong? A big bank is strong because they got a lot of money, they got a lot of people, they're very big, they got a lot of resources. What is the inherent weakness if you're big? Well, big institutions are slow. So we said to United Jersey, you're the fast-moving bank. I'll never forget, the chief executive said, I'm sorry, Al. Our bank is no faster than Citibank. We're no faster than Chase. And we said, that's okay. If you're shooting for second place, your strategy is determined by the leader. Therefore, you got to change the bank. You got to change everything you do so that you can become the fast-moving bank. So that's what they did. They changed all their procedures of the bank. They speeded up the mortgages, the car loans. Everything they did was faster. And then they launched a program calling themselves the Fast-Moving Bank. And income rapidly doubled in 3 years. But you got a winner when you see this idea, this concept the fast-moving bank on the cover of the United Jersey Annual Report. You know, one of the big examples of this idea of what to do if you're shooting for number 2 is Pepsi-Cola. See, Coke is the leader, but Coke is a 110-year-old product, 110 years old. Now, what's the weakness if you're 110 years old? Well, your parents drank Coca-Cola. So what Pepsi-Cola said is, you don't want to drink the same stuff that your parents drank, do you? You're the Pepsi generation. And the kids and the younger people reacted to that tremendously. And where Coke used to outsell Pepsi 2-to-1 today, Coke outsells Pepsi in the United States about 10-to-9. Pepsi is a very close number 2 brand. So that's what you got to do. If you really want to be number 2, what you have to do is the opposite of what the leader does. That's the law of the opposite. The next law is the law of line extension. There's an irresistible pressure to extend the equity of the brand. Everybody wants to take their name and put it on everything. Take Scott Tissue, for example. Scott was the #1 brand of toilet tissue. So what did they do with the Scott name? They put it on napkins, they put it on towels, they put it on nose tissue, they put it on everything. And today, Scott is no longer the #1 toilet tissue. Charmin is. Try this. Think of it as a shopping list. Let's say I have a shopping list and I go to the supermarket on Saturday. If it says Coca-Cola, I know what to buy. I buy those little brown bottles. If it says Kleenex, I buy nose tissue. If it says Charmin, I buy toilet tissue. But what do I buy if it says Scott? And what part of the body do I use it on when I get it home? Scott is well known, but Scott doesn't stand for anything. When you put your name on everything, your name loses its power. And yet, most companies today do that. They try to think of all the crazy things they can put their name on. Bic pantyhose? I mean, Bic is a lighter. Bic is a pen. So they put their name on pantyhose? The bottom fell out of this market in a big hurry. And then there's Pierre Cardin wine. Pierre Cardin wine? Pierre Cardin is a designer. I mean, I took this bottle of wine, I opened the bottle, I gave my wife a glass, she tastes it and she says, well, it tastes all right, but it smells a little sweet. Of course it's going to smell sweet. It says Pierre Cardin. Naturally, Pierre himself smells a little sweet. And would you believe Coors? Coors is a beer. Coors came out with a water called Coors Water. What do you figure? They wash the beer barrels and bottle the wash water? That doesn't make any sense. My favorite is Adidas cologne. Adidas is an athletic shoe. What do you suppose? They take those old athletic shoes and they squeeze the juice out of them to get Adidas cologne? And how about Chanel for men? Chanel is a perfume for women. Why would real men want to wear Chanel? And let me give you a specific example. 7-Up. 7-Up became the 3rd largest selling soft drink in America with 5.6% of the market. Not good enough. They wanted to increase their share. So they came out with Cherry 7-Up and 7-Up Gold. And then just to make sure that you can't exactly remember what to drink, they have the diet versions of those 3 products. So today, 7-Up's market share is 3.9% of the market. Does that make sense? Not to me. I mean, you go in a restaurant and say, give me a 7-Up, and the waitress says, would you like a regular 7-Up or a cherry 7-Up? Oh, I think I'll try a cherry 7-Up today. Would you like a regular cherry 7-Up or a diet cherry 7-Up? The heck with it. Give me a Coke. Would you like a regular Coke or a diet Coke? It is beginning to be hard to order anything today because manufacturers take their name and they put it on everything. Now, let's take an example that people consider to be a real success, Diet Coke. Everybody says, this is a tremendously successful product. It's the product of the decade. Well, there is a lot of Diet Coke sold, but you may not remember that the day Diet Coke was introduced, the Coca-Cola company had a Diet Cola. It was called Tab. And you know what? Tab was a big seller. Tab outsold Diet Pepsi by 32%. Now the market took off. The market exploded. But today, Diet Coke outsells Diet Pepsi by just 29%. You could argue that Tab is a better name than Diet Coke. Now another problem. You know, sometimes you're successful with line extension. Sometimes you're successful putting your name on a new product. Like, for example, Heinz was #1 in pickles. So they put their Heinz name on ketchup, and Heinz ketchup became the #1 brand of ketchup. But you know what? They lost their pickle leadership to Vlasic. Today, Vlasic is the #1 brand of pickle, 29% of the market, and Heinz used to be the leader with just 4% of the market. Now, one of the reasons that companies get confused about line extension, it tends to work in the short term, but not in the long term. It's kind of like alcohol, kind of like drinking, you know? Is alcohol a stimulant or is alcohol a depressant? Well, in the short term, alcohol clearly is a stimulant. But you know, after you've had 3 or 4 and 5 or 6 hours have passed, alcohol is clearly a depressant. So too with line extension. In the short term, line extension can stimulate sales, but in the long term, line extension usually depresses sales. That's the law of line extension. You know what the most difficult job in marketing is? It's getting in the mind of the customer or prospect. But there is a law that can make that job easier. It's the law of candor. When you admit the negative, the reader will give you the positive. Take Volkswagen. Years ago, people wanted big cars. So Volkswagen admitted their car was small. They said, think small. That's a negative. But having said that, then they talked about all the benefits of having a small car. I mean, you use less gasoline, it's easier to park, it makes your house look bigger. So by admitting the negative, they were able to communicate the positive. And my favorite ad, the 1970 VW will stay ugly longer. I mean, yeah, it's ugly, but it's reliable. And maybe you remember that famous Rolls-Royce ad? At 60 miles an hour, the loudest sound in this new Rolls-Royce is the electric clock. They're talking about the clock being noisy. You know, after they ran that ad, the engineers said, let's fix the clock. No, don't fix the clock. I mean, having a noisy clock makes people think the car is quiet, and people think a quiet car is a quality car. Remember Avis? Avis lost money for 13 years in a row. And then they ran this campaign. Avis is only #2 in rent-a-cars. That's the negative. So why go with us? We try harder. Oh, that makes sense. If you're #2, you try harder. Some of the most famous campaigns in advertising history are based on negative ideas. Remember when Benson and Hedges launched the first 100-millimeter or long cigarette? They talked about the disadvantages of Benson and Hedges. They had 2 guys talking. One guy smoking a Benson and Hedges, and he burned the beard of the guy he's talking to. And another guy gets in an elevator smoking a cigarette, the doors close, cut the cigarette in half. The disadvantages of a long cigarette, Benson and Hedges. And Joy perfume. The only thing the Joy ads have ever said is the costliest perfume in the world. They're bragging about the fact that it's so expensive. If you don't like the smell of Joy perfume, have your nose fixed. It can't be the perfume. The perfume costs $365 an ounce. Take another example, Motel 6. See, Motel 6 is the lowest cost of any national motel chain in America. Now, here's a very good point. If you're selling a low-priced product, a good thing to tell people is what they don't get with the low price. In other words, what they have to give up in order to get the benefit of having a low price. That's what Motel 6 does. Here's an ad that says, how to take a bath at Motel 6. The poor guy's in the shower. There are no bathtubs in Motel 6. That's what you have to give up to get the low price at Motel 6. If you want to get in the mind of anybody, the best way to start is by saying something negative about yourself, something negative about your product. That's the law of candor. Well, there's a mistake here about line extensions. The thing that causes your problem is not the line extension per se. It's advertising and communicating that line extension and confusing the mind of the customer or prospect. The first thing a company should do is to focus their advertising on a single product or service. It's not so important exactly what they manufacture and sell. The most important thing here is the advertising. If you focus your advertising on a single product, even though you have, let's say, a relatively broad line, you still have a focused approach. Well, nothing in business can you ever know exactly. It's always a guess. It's always your good judgment. For example, Lotus. Lotus got started in spreadsheets. But the spreadsheet business is kind of a commodity. It doesn't have much expansion. Everybody that has it or needs a spreadsheet has a spreadsheet. So Lotus decided to change their focus, and they focused on groupware. Very successful focus. They were first in a new category. They created that new category, groupware, with a product called Notes. They were so successful that IBM paid them $3.5 billion for that company. That's an enormous price. Well, you see, most advertising agencies believe in the power of creativity. What is creativity? It's kind of hard to define, but fundamentally, creativity means doing something different. Whatever anybody else is doing, you do it different. So, in a sense, they're looking for maybe wild and crazy ways to say things, and yet, you see, focus and all those other positioning concepts are based on simple ideas like being first, like creating a new category. Most advertising agencies don't find that these things are very creative, so they resist them. I don't think it's a question of a theory here or a principle. I think most advertising agencies are devoted to doing something different. They are trying to be creative. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. In other words, what I'm saying is it doesn't really matter whether an ad is creative or not. The thing that matters is whether the ad establishes the right focus for a company inside the mind. And then it could be very uncreative and still be very successful. Oh, it has to be the entire company, and it has to be led by the chief executive or the CEO. A company today cannot be successful unless the chief executive is a good marketing person. I mean, that is crucial. And as a matter of fact, I think companies should be run from a marketing point of view, not a financial point of view, not a production or a manufacturing point of view. If you want to be successful today, marketing is where it's at. Well, I have a couple of candidates, and they're all chief executives because chief executives are really the only one that can have the total control you need to do a good marketing job. For example, Robert Gozetta, of chief executive of Coca-Cola, has done a terrific job. Coca-Cola is worth, it's the third wealthiest company in the entire world. In other words, it's worth these days $120 billion. A very successful company. My second candidate would be Andy Grove, the chief executive of Intel. Intel has 80% of the worldwide business for microprocessors. See, one of the principles here is that you dominate a market. When you dominate a market, you become very, very, very powerful. And I would have to say Bill Gates, although he's made some mistakes, Bill Gates has 90% of the operating system business, the desktop computer operating system business in the entire world. That is really powerful. And there's some other people that are very good. Michael Dell of Dell Computer has done a terrific job in dominating the direct selling market for personal computers. And there are quite a few others, but those are my top choices. These are the laws of marketing. They're simple. They're basic, they're fundamental. They're really easy to understand. The problem is applying the laws to your specific situation. See, any real-life situation is complicated, a lot of things happening out there. It's difficult to see the forest for the trees. But I can assure you that if you study your situation long enough, you'll find that some things will become crystal clear. You'll be able to see your situation in terms of one of the laws of marketing. If you apply that law to your situation, if you diligently pursue the law of marketing, I guarantee you will be a big success, your company will be a big success. On the other hand, violate the laws of marketing, and you do so at your own risk. So long. True in some other product, but I forgot what it was. Okay, here we go.